Welcome to iAMradio number 14. Today I will be presenting in around 10 minutes a technique, get it? To allow for you to be more present more often. And the technique I will be introducing today is called JK. You'll learn more in just a moment. I would start by saying, what is it to be present? And I'd imagine there are several ways to explain it. To me, it is I'm with the information that's here and not the information that's here. When you have been with the inner narrator or thinking all of your life, which likely you have, except for moments of flow, it might seem impossible to imagine that you could do it like all the time. And wouldn't that cause problems? Here's what I found. One, in the technique we'll talk about, JK, you're not doing what you think you're doing by thinking. And two, you are hiding, ironically, what you're looking for. So thinking uses abstracts of what is and personal interpretations or learned interpretations of what is in a way that makes you think that you can control stuff if you understand stuff. And one of the things you're likely trying to control in your moment is how you present. You want to say the right thing in the right way. You want to look like this or, etc. When you make those adjustments to your expression, so let's say naturally you want to be like, call y'all, I'm out. You artificially hold systems, relationships, dynamics in place in a way that ultimately causes your suffering and probably somebody else's. So partly what I'm pointing out is when you attempt to control your expression through thinking, you're not doing anybody a service. And that was something that really took some time for me to unpack, because I grew up in a lovely small town where it's very much about it's a very grounded and real place, but there is a lot of learned say, don't say, dance, don't dance. And that could have been particular to my family, or my exposure to people, etc. So what I just told you was a story about what was that I don't really know. And I started to say, this is how it is there. And you heard me then interrupt it and say, well, actually, it could have been like this, or interrupt it, it could have been like that. Thinking takes a story like that. This is how things are. And you might have concluded that off of what you think is the most convincing evidence ever. And then you would have built a reality out around that conclusion. So that conclusion where I'm saying it's like this in that town, if you think about the town and think about navigating it, you use your abstraction of what is rather than how the town might actually be. What's wild about the stories we tell ourselves is we can record them with very little prompting. Let's say you were kind of in a weak or softened position and you weren't really feeling that confident or comfortable, and someone told you that, or you had an experience that it was like that. It only really needs to happen once for your adorable little melon to be like, this is how it is. And for the rest of your time on earth, unless you're vigilant, you'll likely live as if that's how it was. So you use your story then to filter your expression so let's say you go to the small town, you have your story, it's like this. you would live out what you think is without ever really seeing what was. So when we're talking about being present, one expression of that is not filtering who or what you would be or do naturally to accommodate what you think is required. When people are in relationships, either romantically, professionally, etc., friends, there's a lot of restriction of the expression because of what somebody thinks somebody else might need or require. I've talked about this in several broadcasts, and I pointed out because it's an area where there's a lot of unnecessary suffering, where there can be a quick fix. And the quick fix is really asking what somebody else requires or asking how things really are, rather than acting as if you knew and adjusting yourself or compromising yourself in a way that was uncomfortable. Another thing, whenever you're thinking, let's say you're not present, and you're not present because, so this is now you and Joy with the backwards J. You're in a room full of people that you love in a place that's magical, but your mind might be how you screwed up something and that other person might be still thinking about it, or how are you going to be able to explain something to somebody later, or what about how are you going to, so you leave what is to go be with information. When you leave to be with the information, generally your point is you think that by interacting with it, you'll figure out how to be present later. But you likely don't hear, I'm going to know how, I'm going to understand my past so I can let it go, so I can, so I can be present later. Likely what you think is you'll feel better, you'll feel free, you'll feel more confident, But all of those things are accessible now when you don't know that they're not. So thinking when you're in other places in time and space is generally because you think that you'll be able to understand in a way that will ultimately allow for you to control conditions so that you can feel good because of the conditions. When you have this stuff, when you are that, when it is this, when they stop that. Conditional happiness. It's conditional. And that basically means it's fleeting. If you're looking for long-standing peace and joy, it's here. It's this practice where you recognize when your mind is somewhere else or your expression is compressed or distorted or changed or something because of, and you peel off the thoughts or you peel off the ideas that make it seem like those are things you want to do. So today's technique, almost right on time, is JK. And that basically means whenever you're thinking, here's a story. So I use the small town one example, but let's say you had a barber, and one day you went into the barber and you were telling him about something that happened and he got really tense. And you thought like, oh man, I really upset him with what I said. And so the next time you go there, you don't talk about that thing. And you notice like he's even more uncomfortable because you think like, oh man, this is something with me. What did I do? And you start to build out and think about this problem that you have with the barber. But what if he got tense while he was cutting your hair because he left the moment and thought about something that he didn't do, and you interpreted what was happening as personal? And then you carried that forward into your next interaction, and you made something where there wasn't something, because then he was thinking the same thing about you. And so both of you are not even with what is, you're both with ideas around what the other person might be thinking or what else you might be doing, rather than relaxing into what is and recognizing nobody fucking knows. Being present, being fully there is scary generally because it means that you can't hide. Object permanence is fleeting when focusing on being in the presence. Object permanence is fleeting when focusing on being in the presence. I'm sorry, Eric. I think I might not be following that completely. Are you saying that what you, like, in attaching, attached objects aren't permanent? So if you're present, then could you add a few more words or help me see where I'm missing you? Okay. So with that example with the barber, basically what I'm saying is, here is an otherwise like neutral experience that's been interpreted, abstracted, distorted, etc. in a way that takes people out of what is and then has them live in these illusions or these stories about what's happening. The best way to break this, so anything anybody's thinking about is imaginary. It's in the head. So even if you're thinking about facts, you're still thinking about facts in a framework that you've created to answer a question that you have, and all perspectives are equally incomplete because you can't have everything in it. You can't, because what's looking is a part of what's being looked at. And so inherently there are limits in even facts, especially I forget if it's a quote or something I read. Well, I guess it'd be the same. It might actually be something I wrote. I can't remember, that was given to me. But basically that people are pretty sure about things. Like, a lot of the things that people are pretty sure about change. And so when you're using facts in your analysis and you're all up in your head with all your facts, you sometimes forget that those might not even be real. So here you are toiling, moving these puzzle pieces, trying to make the picture, trying to get it out, and you can't. So today's technique that I am about to wrap up is to recognize the futility of thinking and the impossibility of doing it correctly, and to allow for that what you actually want information-wise is right here. So going back to the barber example, what they could do is say like, hey buddy, is everything okay? And then the barber could say, yeah, sorry, I just thought of something. Oh, that whole scenario is then squashed. Right now, it seems like people everywhere are rising up into presence in a way that they're helping each other come here. So if you're talking to somebody and you're not there, you're not going to notice if they're not there. But if you're there, you might notice that they're in their head. Generally, it's bad form to say like, hey, where'd you go? But if you love each other and it's an agreement that you've made, you can really help each other step out of those patterns and come to here. And again, it can be scary to be here because you're going to be there and you can't hide. And also, there are some things to come to terms with around what you actually can't know. We have an illusion of control, and that illusion is predicated on our ability to understand. Does this mean that information and facts and thoughts don't have a place? Absolutely not. It just means recognize when they're taking you away from where you are and what you have so that you can get this later. It's like the mind creates a map and a maze, and it's like, okay, later, if we do this and do that and they do this and this changes, blah, 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 then we'll be okay. But again, you likely don't hear then we'll be okay, and it also likely doesn't sound as cartoonish as I made it. But that is generally the point. So when you're thinking about, there is a simplicity that's available when you're here that is counter to a lot of the things that we've been trained to think and do, but has a lot of the answers that you try to find here. For example, if you're thinking about what somebody might think or feel, why don't you ask them? Shoot them a text. Hey buddy, I said this the other day. Did you think anything about it? You would be your mind would be blown to see actually what's happening versus what you think is happening. And if you wanted to have homework, I'd let it be that. Experiment with testing what you think is real. So don't believe me, like do your own research and then today's technique, which was supposed to be 10-ish minutes and is actually more towards 15, is to see that when you leave the present, which means you're in your mind, either to control your expression or to analyze or try to understand anything, likely when you leave here, you're trying to get here, but later, which is so crazy. I had some notes, example. Oh, it does seem that, and I think I'll do a live more on trauma. I really don't like that word. And also healing, which is another word I think could be different. Because it does seem like if you've had some shit happen in your moment or several moments in a row where you were physically uncomfortable or you were overpowered by other people, and generally like this would be for you as a child, you get really good at leaving here because here doesn't feel good, and you get really good at trying to anticipate how later places might feel better or good. And so you build most of your thinking model on a better later. And God bless you, because if you're doing that, again, you went through some shit. So be gentle with you. If you notice you have a really active mind and you're constantly leaving the present, it's likely because you learned to, because you needed to. So in those instances, like I said, be kind to yourself, which means like, think it's cute or funny if you're thinking. Think it's cute or funny if you're not present. Don't be mad or feel ashamed. Just breathe, make a joke about it, come back to where you are. You're okay, we're right here. We're right here. Oh, that's a nice color. What do my socks feel like? What's this person saying? What does their voice sound like? How is their face moving? Like, be there. There are also some fears to put down, and maybe this is another live, a different day, around like relativity, how you perceive yourself relative to other people, and also how you perceive yourself in time. All right, let me see if I got all my notes. Any questions, thoughts, feelings, comments, anything? All right, my main points in summary are that one way to be more present is to realize that when you're not present, hello, all right, it's back. Okay, so to recognize that when you are, the information that you're working with, when you're thinking, you mostly made up, and if you didn't make it up, somebody else made it up, and when somebody handed it to you, you made up what you heard they say. It's like we're playing this telephone game all the time, but we don't have space enough away from it to see that the information that we're using here isn't like, it's not what the first person said. Okay, thank you so much for coming out, and I appreciate when you like or share the videos, and if you don't like it, because that helps me see what ones don't resonate. But if it is helpful in any which way, shape, or form, please let me know. That's helpful to me. And I do coach mindfulness one-on-one, and I'm looking at offering that for specific groups as well, or groups that you might create yourself. And that looks like I can take the concepts that I have and tailor them to your life and the areas that you're sticking on. Most people generally know where they're not seeing correctly, but there's too much emotion or history or something, and they're not able to break the barrier and actually take the truth or the success formula they have in other areas and bring it to this one. I love to do that. So if you find yourself sticking somewhere, or know that being present would be helpful for you, or you're working your way out of some trauma or some things you did in response to trauma, I would love to work with you. You can go to haveabook.com and book an info call, and over 15 minutes we'll just have a short conversation. You'll say, this is where I am, this is what I want to do, and I'll say, okay, yes, that's something that I work with, here's how we do it. I'll give you all the information about working together, and if you want to do it, great. And if not, I respect that as well. I really am out here trying to empower people to do you in all my aspects of this. Thank you so much for coming out. If you have any requests for topics in the future, please let me know. We're on broadcast 14. I'll likely do 24.